Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Pond, the awards editor of TheWrap, and we're so happy to have you here for night one of our Oscar Contenders showcase celebrating short films. Today's showcase is devoted to 4 documentary shorts: A Love Song for Latasha, What Would Sophia Loren Do?, John Was Trying to Contact Aliens, and Draw With Me. We're going to start by showing you the trailers to each short, and then we'll go right into a conversation with the filmmakers. To our audience, please participate in the live chat, share your thoughts about the film, let us know where you're watching from. And at the end of our conversation, we will be taking audience questions, so you can submit them via the chat option. Before we introduce our guests, here are the trailers to our 4 short documentaries.
People don't know who she was as an individual. They don't know. They just know that she was just a young Black girl who was worth $1.79. They don't know. Latasha would always talk about when we got older, we could own businesses. Because every time we go into a store, they either following us, giving us dirty looks, disrespecting us. Don't you want to have something on your own? She wanted to be a lawyer, so that's what she was aiming for, to get good grades. She had all A's. You just try to look harder. She just didn't end up statistic. Sometimes I think, how did I get this far? And she not. I know she'd be married by now. She loved the fellas. She probably would have 3 kids by now. She'd be an awesome mother. She was a loving person. I still appreciate her for being who she was back then.
You know, when they had a problem and they'd run it by me, I would often ask myself, what would Sophia Loren do?
What would Sophia Loren do?
Why me? My parents, they went to the Italian movies. And I remember seeing Sophia Loren. Now there's a lady I wouldn't mind looking like her.
Troppo decolleté.
She depicts a very strong woman. And that really inspired me.
I think that the steps of my career have been really very hard.
How many things have we all had that happened beyond our control? No matter what, you have to go forward. She never gave up. That's courage, that's strength.
What really counts is your belief in life, in people, in everybody.
And I'll start it up. And we'll start generating. I started building the electronic equipment to make contact with whatever might be out there beyond the Earth.
John has a very special mission in life. He is trying to contact aliens.
It grew to encompass an entire bedroom. That equipment continued to grow. I built this 2-story high deep space transmitter. It allowed me to reach deeper and further out into space. So I was always looking to look beyond what we have here.
My interest is in finding out the unknown. And you search and you continue searching because you decide. Because of that, you know there's something there.
Draw With Me is a short film about a transgender youth and their journey of coming out to their family and also engaging in their art to help them cope with the feelings they were having during this time. The film is important and timely in its story and message and can have a huge impact on those of us who watch and experience what Brendan and their family is going through in this time of acceptance and admission. It's a story that's very close to my heart because it was a family affair. It's about accepting change and challenges with love and knowing that when we do, everything is possible. Also because Brendan is magnificent. Enjoy.
Sexual preference has to do with who you go to bed with, and your identity is who you go to bed as.
The hardest part is always telling people. Like, that is always the hardest.
So when my child told me, when I look in the mirror, I don't feel comfortable in the body that I'm in.
Art was a place where I could be myself, where I could do what I wanted, and I didn't have to worry about anybody else finding out about it.
Welcome back. It's my pleasure to introduce from Love Song for Latasha, director Sophia Nolly Allison. From What Would Sophia Loren Do, director Ross Kaufman. From John Was Trying to Contact Aliens, director Matthew Killip. And from Draw With Me, director Konstantin Vinatopoulos. Welcome everybody, and thank you for participating in this great panel.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Sure. Let's go through one movie at a time, and you know, I know everybody in our audience has been sent links to all of the films, but in case they haven't watched them yet, why don't you tell us a little bit about your film and also what led you to want to tell this story? Sophia, let's start with you.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here with everyone. So my film, A Love Song for Latasha, reimagines the life of 15-year-old Latasha Harlins, who was killed in South Central at the age of 15. She was accused of catalyst for the 1992 LA riots. But since then, a lot of people don't know the full story of Latasha. So this film really is an intimate journey through memory with the two women that were closest to Latasha. And by women, I mean they were young girls at the same time that Latasha was killed. Her best friend, Ty Biobard, and her cousin, Shanice Harlan. So this is a really intimate and dream-like journey through the world of who Latasha was based on these memories from experimental in the sense that archival footage that we're using. And I really wanted to tell this story because I'm a native of South Central. Important for me to the stories of Black women and Black girls, and for Latasha to finally exist far beyond just the context of her death, but for us to know who she was as a young girl.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we lost a little bit of you, but I think we got what you were saying.
No.
Anyway.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Let's move to Ross. I mean, what would Sophia Loren do? What led you to tell us a little bit about it and what led you to make it?
Well, first of all, I heard enough of what you said, Sophia. It sounded great, and everyone's films on this panel are really wonderful. So congrats to everybody. Sophia Loren, what would Sophia Loren do? Basically, what it is it's about an Italian American grandmother who, for years, admired and loved Sophia Loren from a place of she would watch her films and she would just sort of have a sense of her and the beauty and the grace that she brought to every film and her life, really. And she, at a certain point, when her family or when friends would come to her with advice, her name is Vincenza. Vincenza would say, give them the advice, and then at the very end of like her spiel, she would say, "But tell me, what would Sophia Loren do?" And it became a motto, and it became sort of a catchphrase, and it really came to symbolize what it means to have resilience and grace, and what it is really to be a mother, to be a grandmother, and to live life in a way, in a very sort of graceful way.
Mm-hmm. So how did you come to tell this story?
Well, I'd been working with a woman named Regina Scully on other projects, and Vincenza is Regina's mother. And Regina just came and told me one day about her mom, and told me all about her, and told me about this catchphrase, and we right away we both said this has to be a little movie. We should definitely do this. And honestly, I thought, oh, it sounds sweet, but as we really unraveled as the film unraveled and we got to know Vincenza, it really took on the phrase took on a really a depth and a resonance that was really quite beautiful for me.
Mm-hmm. Right. Matthew, tell us a little bit about John was trying to contact aliens and what led you to make it.
Hi, I'm Matt, and the film it's a documentary about a man who spent 30 years sending music into outer space in the hopes of trying to contact aliens, it has a tonal shift towards the end of the film, and it really ends up being about something a bit broader than contacting aliens.
Mm-hmm. So why did you want to make it? How did you come to it?
Well, I came across a photo of John in a book, and it's the photos in the film. It's a photo of a kind of like a modest living room that's been completely overtaken by all this strange electronic machinery and contraptions, which was the machines that John was using to try and contact aliens. But the kind of very endearing part about his story was that he did this from his grandparents' home. So in the photo, there's a picture of John with all these machines, and next to him in an armchair is his grandmother doing her knitting. And there was just something about that picture, the sort of very ordinary nature of the living room being taken over by this extraordinary search, that made me want to try and track John down. And then when I started to get to know John a little bit better and know some of the details of his personal history, that was when I thought I could make a film about him. And so I did.
Right. Constantine, what about you? What led you to this particular story? And tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you for having me, and an honor to be in the company of such talented filmmakers. I've been a volunteer for the Trevor Project for over 10 years, which is the leading suicide prevention line for LGBTQ youth. And through my work there, I've learned a lot about the community. I myself openly gay, and learning more about the trans community through it and how to support the youth. This project came to me quite organically. I was working on another film, feature film, with Leslie Ann Lopez, the mother of the youth in the documentary. And by getting to know the family through my friend producer Marco, when I was having dinner at their home, I met Brendan, the kid, and Brendan's room was filled with art. And one thing led to another, and we just started talking about their art and how their art had helped them. And then one thing led to another, and Brendan mentioned to me that they had reached out to the Trevor Project one time when they attempted suicide. So at that point, I just found I thought that using their art in a way to tell this story, and we worked in partnership with the Trevor Project making it, it would be valuable for people to learn more about trans youth and coming out and acceptance.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the style and the tone of these films. And I'll go back to you, Sophia, because you're telling us about the life of this girl who was killed almost 30 years ago. But it's not a here's what happened. It's a very lyrical look at who she was then. I mean, how did you hit upon, how you wanted to tell the story?
I knew I wanted a very abstract understanding of time throughout it. I didn't want it to be a linear experience. When we think about memories, when we think about how our memories are impacted by trauma, so often it becomes a very nonlinear experience where the past, present, and future are all in conversation with one another. So I knew I wanted to play with time and how we move through this story. I also wanted it to feel very reminiscent of a home video. I wanted it to be directly in conversation and juxtaposing and even challenging the video footage that we do have of Latasha's death. And that video footage it's a grainy surveillance video. But what happens when we take that grainy surveillance video and incorporate it to the understanding of VHS recordings that you would create for a home video? So what is the way to really take people back to the 80s and the 90s and then have them come back in the present with us? The other thing I really thought about was, because I don't have archival footage to use to show Latasha, despite just, a couple of photos, knowing that the images that I created had to be very intentional. I wanted these young girls to feel like they were the representation of all three of them. Not one young girl was portraying Ty, Shanice, or Latasha, but it became they all could be Latasha. They all could be a Ty, Shanice. I could be one of these young girls. So I wanted it to be a secret language among Black women, among Black girls, among the community. I wanted this to be a healing experience when the community saw. So many people remembered seeing Latasha's, the footage of her death. So we were very intentional not to incorporate that. How do we challenge and disrupt what we think, documentary has to be with B-roll footage or archival footage? And so this is the reclaiming of, well, we're now creating our own imagery to be in conversation with the story that didn't necessarily have that archival and that tangible footage to pull from, but it was always a rich story with an oral history. And so my approach to this was a very meditative process, with really sitting with the words that Ty and Shanice shared with us, the interviews, and meditating on that, spending time in the communities where Latasha grew up. There were moments where I don't even take my camera to her school or her neighborhood, and I just wanted to walk around the environment. I wanted to really feel what was it like when Ty, Shanice, and Latasha were young girls. So a very experimental approach of wanting to challenge the archive, wanting to disrupt the archive, and wanting to create images that young Black girls, when they look at this, they see themselves represented in a beautiful way. They see themselves exalted. They see themselves in moments of peace and rest and solitude, and in community with each other. So it was a very methodical process, to create this new archive, this new spiritual archive, and really wanting it to be a collaboration with Ty and Shanice and with the community to help us retell this story.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I picked up the Los Angeles Times this morning, and there on the front page of the California section, there's a story about a mural that was just unveiled of Latasha this weekend, I think.
Yes.
I assume you were aware when you're making this that it is certainly as much about now as it is about 30 years ago.
Yes, what's interesting? So the mural was revealed on Latasha's birthday, actually on January 1st, which would have been her 45th birthday. And what's so significant about January 1st is up until the end of last year, a lot of people had her birthday wrong. I'm not sure how that happened, but people had her year wrong and her date wrong. And so this was really, Netflix helped us memorialize this moment and celebrate her birthday by having this mural come to life and fruition on the day that she would have turned 45. And when I actually began working on this project, it was 2017, and I didn't even think about the 30 year, the 45th year. I was just thinking, this is what I want for the community. This is what I want for Ty and Shanice, for the Harlan's family. So it's just been really interesting to see how the film has continuously been in conversation with time, been in conversation with what's happening. The week that the film came out, the verdict about Breonna Taylor actually was announced. So it was this eerie, this eerie moment where time felt to stand still, even though we've been moving through all these times. But it feels so intentional that the film is having its moment now, when it is the 30-year anniversary for her death, and it is the 45th year anniversary for her birthday, because when I began the film, it was the 25-year anniversary for the Los Angeles riots. So my mind was always on the LA riots, and it's obvious that Latasha even had something much bigger planned. So it's been beautiful just to see how this film has continued to be a part of the conversation of, racial injustice, of, Black women and Black girls being victimized. And it feels so poignant and just as relevant as it was in 1991 and 1992 as 2021 and last year, 2020.
Yeah. So Ross, I mean, you're telling a story here about two very different women, but finding links between them. What was your thinking in terms of how you wanted to tell it as a director, how you wanted to present these two stories?
That's a good question. It was interesting because like most films, we don't know where they're going to go. Most documentaries, you start them and they take all sorts of twists and turns and you have no idea. And in the beginning, when we first started this film, it wasn't even a film. We didn't really know what we were doing. We were just sort of filming this wonderful grandmother and trying to sort of understand who she is. And we didn't have any sort of sense that even maybe Sophia wouldn't even be in it. We didn't even know if we would see her films. We didn't know what. So it was really about sort of understanding little by little what the film sort of, not to sound too pretentious, but wanted to be. And as we progressed, we just found that Sophia and her movies really became it had this resonance for Vincenza's life, and it became something that she could look at, like we all look at movies. We all look at movies and we all look at art, or hopefully most of us, and we get so much from art and it informs our lives. And little by little, we start to understand how Sophia, her movies, her just who she was really helped inform Vincenza's life. It was fascinating how it unraveled. And I didn't know how much this lovely Italian grandmother would really share of her life, and the depth that she brought to this film was, I always knew she was wonderful, but she shared things with us that we had no idea she would share, very, very intimate details about her life. And it was, it was a real honor just to sort of understand what she went through. And, the film really became about resilience and loss and love.
Right. I mean, did you know that this film was probably going to be coming out at the same time as Sophia's first acting performance in 10 years?
Yeah, The Life Ahead. We had no idea. I mean, we started this 2.5 years ago before they started making, Sophia started her film. And there was never any trajectory that it was just purely by coincidence, almost with COVID, that The Life Ahead is coming out. It came out in November, and that we basically came out in November. It was a pure fluke. It's lovely because I got to go to Bari in Italy and shoot on the set at a certain point, but there was no real preconceived thought.
Yeah, right. So Matthew, you alluded to this before, but the film, we think we're watching one kind of film for much of it, and then it does take a shift at a certain point where it's not just about this guy trying to contact aliens at all. Was that always part of your thinking going into this?
Yes, that was always part of my thinking. I think once I sort of heard some of the details of John's life story, that was always the shape of the film that I had in my mind. And it's just I think probably all the other directors here will know that there's a sort of thing with documentary. There's different ways of approaching it, and you can be quite rigid in what kind of film you think you're making before you go in, or you can really be very open. And I think with me, I really knew what the shape of the film was going to be. And as I spent time with John, things changed, but I always knew the destination. I always knew where I was going with it and how it would change towards the end. But yeah, that was the process.
I mean, I would imagine that you know, John has spent years sort of being mocked by some people for, you know, for his obsession with contacting aliens, but you know, you got him in very open, you know, vulnerable circumstances. I mean, how do you gain his trust to be able to, you know, to get him to share the kind of things he did?
Well, I think first and foremost, John is just a very lovely human being. He's a very open person. And I'm thankful that comes across on the camera, because that doesn't actually always come across, does it? If someone can be a very lovely person, but it doesn't read. But it does with John. I think you sort of see it in his eyes. And the way I film, I think that also, I might be wrong in this, but Sophia, I think you shoot yourself as well. Is that right?
I was thinking the same thing and was hoping we could talk about that. Yes.
Yes. So I shoot with John, and when John is doing the interviews, they're done directly to camera, and that's partly creates like a sort of sense of intimacy. It's partly also just a practical thing, because it's just me there with a camera. So it'd be kind of odd to do that sort of documentary trope of looking off camera, because he'd be looking at no one. But he's talking directly to me. So the sort of process of how we worked was, I went up to Michigan, and I just stayed there for around a week, and I just filmed with him for a few hours every day, and it's really just me and him. You know, I mic'd him up. There's no other crew. It's just me and him talking. So I think that's partly where the feeling of intimacy comes from. But as I say, I just think he's a very sensitive, lovely person, and I was lucky that comes through, I think, in the interviews.
Yeah. Well, Sophia, let's go back to you then. I mean, is it important for you that you shoot this stuff yourself as well?
Absolutely. So thank you for bringing that up, Matthew, because I think that's why there was such intimacy with your film, and that we're so invested on this journey, and it feels like he's letting us into this personal moment of his life. And so for A Love Song for Latasha, I knew that I would be asking these women to really think back to a moment that was very traumatizing, and I didn't want it to ever re-trigger them. I wanted them to feel safe with me. I wanted them to feel safe in the space with everyone that was there. So for Shanice, it was just myself, my camera, I, you know, mic'd her up. And then for Ty B, for her interview, it was myself and then just one of my producers, Famu Dorji, always maintaining a very intimate space for them to feel safe, for it not to feel exploitative. I know that is something in the past that they have experienced with how people handle the story of Latasha Harlins. And I wanted this to be, I wanted them to feel safe throughout the entire process. And even while filming the different vignettes throughout the film, it was just myself as the camera person and then my creative producer, Janice Duncan. So there was no more than one or two people there, so that it always felt intimate. I felt if it became this big production, it would really take away from the texture of the film. I needed the audience to feel like you were invited into this private memory, this private world just for a moment, and you were being invited into it. Always wanting the young girls that were in the film to never feel like they had to act or perform, but that they were just themselves. And so by me being the only camera person, it allowed them to remember the essence of this story, why we were doing this, and not create this big production around it, but just allow for that beautiful intimacy.
Well, Constantine, obviously you're dealing with some of the same things. I mean, I would imagine that, you know, Brendan and their family might not be inclined to open up about an experience that, you know, is ongoing and can be very painful. So how did you get such intimacy and honesty yourself?
Yeah, as you said, Steve, I'm kind of picking up where Sophia left at. This was a very private and intimate family portrait, and it was actually my first documentary, so it was my first time dabbling with telling a story of someone, a real story. So it was a very, you know, what was really important to me was to create that safe space for the family. Also having a public figure, which is the aunt of Brandon, who is Jennifer Lopez, that creates even more of such a space to make sure that it's a safe environment for the family to open up. So, but the key focus always remained Brandon for me and their art. And that was how I was able to never lose track in a way. I was like looking at the story through Brendan's art. And it all started from one drawing, in fact, that if you see the longer version, there's one drawing that Brendan walks in the dark woods, and we animated that. So it's almost like you're walking through their art to learn about them. And but directorially, I would say, I was trying to, there are parts where Brendan cuts the hair of a Barbie, things like that. So through visuals to create that space of, we're learning about them, but we escape the room in a sense and look at their world. And my focus, to be honest, was also telling a story that could help other youth, so that are going through similar stories. And that was what Brendan didn't ask me, but that's what Brendan really wanted. Brendan always says, I had a supportive family, and I was really lucky in that way. Yes, they did have a tough journey as well. There are elements of that, but overall they had a supportive family and friends. So they wanted to tell this story so that other youth and trans youth can see and know that not all stories have an unhappy ending, that there are some stories that end well and continue well. And I was also, because I was doing it in partnership with the Trevor Project, I was always trying to make a safe space so that the film can be seen. So, even though we deal with a lot of mental health issues and things like that, at the end, I try to keep it somewhat light so that this can be an educational piece. Because just to mention, the Trevor Project was born out of a short film 22 years ago. It was called Trevor, and it was an Oscar winner. And from that tiny 10-minute film, there is the largest organization in the world that prevents suicide for LGBTQ youth. So that educational aspect was always important to me.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, was the art always a key for you? I mean, I think that's one of the wonderful things about the movie is that we go into this world through the art, because the first section of the movie, we see this art that's just enthralling, and then we sort of meet the creator. Was that always going to be your way into this world?
I think it was what I said that kept me grounded in that world. The world is, whenever in all these films, whenever you're doing a documentary, when you speak to the mother, you're not in Brendan's world, you're in the mother's world. When you speak to the sibling, you're in the sibling's world. So you're not really always in one world. It's like a communication in a sense. So for me, the art was what grounded me, and Brendan themselves and their story in a sense. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the biggest challenges of these particular films, and it could be creative, it could be financial, it could be logistical. Just what were the challenges that you really found yourself facing and having to figure out as you were making it, Sophia?
Definitely financial. That short films, that was an issue. For me, it was a beautiful challenge. I had to really create my own blueprint of how do you create a documentary if you aren't filming B-roll, aren't shooting verite, and having to really reimagine these moments that were shared with me by Ty and Shanice. And then I think the most challenging part was really rethinking how we discuss Latasha's death. It takes about 6 minutes to find out that's who this is the Latasha Harlins that we're speaking about. I didn't want the audience to watch this thinking about Latasha in the context of her death. I wanted to make them have to excavate this information with us, get to know who this young girl is. And then when we approach that part, wanting to be really careful in the sense that, number one, again, we aren't using the footage. It's so easy to use the footage. It's been seen, but that's also been a very harmful video for the family, for friends, for the community. And so what do we use in place of that? And we had an amazing animator work with us, Buki Bodunran, and she created this beautiful companion piece to go along with Ty's audio. Ty is such a natural storyteller, and her words are so captivating that we didn't want the visuals to take away from Ty, but we wanted them to be, we wanted the audience to really feel what Ty was experiencing. We wanted these visuals to be a piece of the archive that we're asking the audience to put this together. You have to enter this world with Ty, listen to her words, understand what the distortion of what that moment felt like. And so you'll notice at that part too, the piece starts to deteriorate, almost like the memory is deteriorating, the evidence is deteriorating, Ty. So even though it was the hardest, it was the most beautiful of, well, how do I, as a Black filmmaker, decolonize what it means to talk about Black trauma, Black death, and show the key components that people would not show the key components that people would expect, and feel so grateful with how that process turned out. But it took 2 years to really discover all of these answers and find the right language that was needed to reimagine Latasha's story.
Mm-hmm. Right. Ross, what about for you? What were the big challenges?
Oh, there with every film, there's so many challenges. Documentaries, and it's funny with a short film. People think, oh, it's a short film, as we've all experienced. Oh, it must be easier than a feature film. Hard to find, it's hard to find that rhythm, that space, and the bringing it all together in a short film. You don't want it to go too long. You don't want it to go too short. You just want to try to find the right. Try to figure out what it is, what it needs to be. With this film, you have two women. You have Sophia Loren, this incredibly glamorous icon, and you have this lovely Italian grandmother. But I knew that their lives were similar. I knew that we needed to see them on a similar plane. We're all, just because Sophia, we all go through the same challenges and the same difficulties and trials and tribulations in life. And to try to sort of create that sense and try to basically create that balance, that this is not just about Sophia Loren. This is really about women. It's about resilience. It's about struggle. It's about love. It's about loss. But most importantly, joy. And that was really probably the biggest challenge.
Right. Matthew, what about you?
I think for me, the challenge was in editing, really. There was a financial challenge in that it was a film that I made myself, but I guess I kind of overcame that by just making it myself. But the big thing I kind of faced, I think, was there's essentially two narratives in the film. There's the story of John's attempt to contact aliens, and then there's also the story of his personal life, his what happened to him. He was basically abandoned by his mother at an early age and raised by his grandparents. He was gay in a sort of quite isolated community. And so those sort of personal elements I wanted to integrate into the story of his search for trying to find extraterrestrial life. And so that was the sort of challenge I felt was trying to integrate those two things and keep them sort of working together. And in the final moments of the film, it kind of twists and becomes a love story. And I edited the film in quite a strange way. I work as an editor quite a lot. And this is sort of what they always tell you shouldn't do. But I basically started at the beginning and kind of fine cut my way through the film, which is something that you just generally don't do. And so in the moment when it sort of switches tone and becomes a love story, it was something that I kind of could watch the film through and see that moment happen. And I was very sort of relieved, I think, and kind of moved when I finally saw that happen myself and see that kind of shift, well, for me anyway, it kind of works and you can kind of accept it as part of the film. And yeah, it was just a very relieving moment because I think that was the biggest challenge.
Right. Constantine, for you, what was the biggest challenge?
Before I jump into that, I just wanted to mention to your question, Steve, about the art and how that was grounding. It was important for me to stay in that space also because art has been Brendan's main outlet. So it was important to show that, and even for me or for us probably, filmmaking can be healing. So for Brendan, art had been healing. So it was important to pass that message along, that people can have outlets that, as a piece of paper and a paintbrush, it's not a lot, but for someone that can be very important. But challenge-wise, I would say my biggest responsibility was not the fundraising, things like that. It was, I've done other films and that has been the challenge there. But here it was such an intimate portrait of a family. So that wasn't the issue. My main challenge had been more internal, like the responsibility that comes with this project of telling this story. So for me, the challenge was feeling confident that I could always take that story and tell it in a way that, is authentic to the family and what they're going through, but becomes a tool and a resource at the same time. I didn't know it at the time, but the film, for example, was the subject of the first ever panel on transgender health at the United Nations during the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots. And, we're working with the New York State Department of Education. So things like that and getting it out that way. But, it did have quite a support, to be honest. Like even President Joe Biden, he spoke in support of the LGBTQ community during an award show that was honoring Draw With Me, the Visibility Award. So yeah, the challenge was, can I do a good enough job with this? That was my challenge.
Yeah. Well, before we open it up to questions from the audience, I do want to talk a bit about the short documentary form, because, obviously 3 of the 4 people on this panel can testify that Netflix supports the form. But also, there are 114 short docs that qualified for the Oscars this year, which is a record, and it feels like it's a very vital form right now. I'm wondering how you feel about the health and vitality of the short doc form. And Ross, let me start with you, because I don't know if you remember, but we met at Oscars rehearsal the year that you won for Born into Brothels, when you won for a documentary feature. So, what brings you to the short form, and why is it a vital way of storytelling?
That's really funny. That was a long time ago. I love short films. I love watching them, so, and I'm a big fan and a big believer that films should be as short as possible. They should be as effective and efficient as possible. I think I love to just try to figure out what the particular film needs to be. But I've done shorts I've actually done a lot of shorts lately, and last 5 or 10 years, and some are 3 minutes long. Some, this film's 33 minutes long. There's so much power and there's so much potential in what a short film can do. And a lot of short films, I have one short film that I'm very proud of it. It's done so much in terms of changing the lance of the face of cancer research. And I just love shorts. And when this came up, could we have made What Would Sophia Loren Do as a feature? Sure, but it really took a lot of work just to figure out what it should be, how long it should be, and just let it speak and let it sort of tell us how long it should be.
Mm-hmm. Right. You talk about the impact that shorts can have. Obviously, Constantine, you just talked about that, but the Trevor Project starting with a short film. Is in the arena that you're working in, do you think the short film is a very valuable format?
I think that all of these stories can be told as shorts, as series, as features. The length is not really what defines the story, I think. One of the beginning points for us is we were creating a showcase story for the Trevor Project, so we wanted to keep it in the shorter space. But I think that's, we've as it evolved, we've had the support of the Onassis Foundation, and it keeps evolving the whole project. But I think, the length of a story should be what you really have to say. Like what you mentioned, Ross, you shouldn't be telling a 3-minute story in an hour, and you shouldn't be telling like a series in a short. So I think each story lends itself to how it best tells itself.
Yeah, right. So Sophia, was it clear to you that this was a story that it should be told in this format?
I love shorts. I will always support and ride for shorts. I just think it requires you to be so intentional with your decisions. It requires for you to really be confident in the decisions you're making. And I always knew I wanted this film to be a short film. I wanted it to be this moment in time that we are transported into. And I just have to say, I completely forgot to mention that the mural is located in South Central, where Ty, Shanice, and Latasha used to play at their community center. And so, you know, seeing how supportive Netflix is of short films, I really hope other places become this supportive. Short films deserve to be recognized. Short films deserve to have the funding that's needed. They deserve to have the support to just have the longevity that they deserve. And I never thought Latasha would exist this long. I never thought that a love song for Latasha would have such a long life. And I really am so thankful that Netflix saw why this was such an important story. But I will forever fight for shorts and just think it's such a beautiful form of storytelling, and so much can be done with that. It allows you to experiment. It allows you to mess up. It allows you to try new things. So I will always love short films.
Right.
Yeah.
Matthew, is the form particularly attractive to you as well?
Oh yeah, totally. And I think that there has to be a sort of distinction between shorts as an overall genre and documentary shorts, because I particularly love documentary shorts. I think that quite often when you go to a film festival and you watch a lot of shorts, the more successful shorts, to my mind anyway, are often documentary shorts. I think that can lend itself to the short form format a bit more than fiction can, because of, I think, something to do with just narrative expectations that that you have. And I love documentary shorts, and I think it's a really exciting time to be making them. The internet's obviously changed everything with access to documentary shorts, but just to echo what Sophia was saying, it's amazing to have a platform like Netflix to sort of amplify this. You know, I made this film entirely on my own, and then to have it sort of like beamed out around the world, and to sort of see the impact that it's had through Netflix. Just a short little 16-minute film that I think would never have had that kind of impact without them has been really incredible. And I sort of joke about John a little bit that, you know, the film is called John Was Trying to Contact Aliens, but really he was actually trying to contact humans. That's sort of the line of the film. And I think that John has just loved seeing this short film go out and touch people. And he has been having an absolute sort of field day with people contacting him and just getting in touch with him and talking to him. And he's been on the radio, local radio and BBC World Service and stuff like that. And it's all just from this little short film that somehow, you know, in 16 minutes has managed to do this. And yeah, I think it's a very powerful form, and I love it, and I will continue to work in it, I hope.
Well, I'm sure we have some questions from the audience that they'll put up on the screen. Let's see what we've got. Yes. Was there anything personal that you walked away from this film with? What stuck with you after working on it? Anybody who wants to tackle this one, please do.
You know,
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
For me, what I took, you know, what I really learned is really bonding with a trans youth and learning a lot about the being trans. So, you know, even though I had friends, but I wasn't so intimate with the subject. So really to understand also the younger generation and where they're going and where they're leading us about for the preferred pronouns, you know, like being able to ask someone, what are your preferred pronouns? Simple things like that can make the life of a trans youth easier and more safe and more comfortable. So I think that's something I really learned about, and you know, seeing this evolve. For example, during the inauguration, the next day on the White House forms, they announced that when you do your contact form now, the they, them, their pronouns is a part of that, which was, you know, a big change and a big evolution. So things like that, learning the language more, understanding it, and how to be there.
Yeah. Sophia, did you have an answer you were about to give?
I was just going to say that Ty and Shanice have stuck with me. There's no getting rid of them, from me to them and them to me. Ty is actually watching right now, like a big sister. She watches all of my panels. So I wanted to give her a special hello. But what I really learned from this is that you can heal through the process of filmmaking. You know, this was the first time that Ty actually spoke about her experience of Latasha being killed when she was a young girl. And it's been beautiful to see how Ty and Shanice have continued to move forward in life and taking the inspiration from Latasha of what she wanted them to do and them continuing it. Ty right now is back in school to get her degree in criminal justice. She and Shanice are working to create their own nonprofit in the community for South Central youth. So for me, the biggest takeaway was this is a film that I wanted to make sure had a lasting impact on Ty and Shanice, that whatever their goals and aspirations were, I was helping them continue that. I was helping them. We were all remembering together the importance of Latasha in their life. And even though Latasha's not still here, she's maintained a lasting print on them. And just wanting this to be something that the Harlan's family could be proud of, that they can say, this is how we remember Latasha. This is getting us closer to who Latasha was.
Right. Okay, we can move on to the next question. I think we have a couple more. What was the most unpredictable thing that happened during filming? Ross or Matthew want to tackle this one?
Go ahead.
Oh, well, actually, I have to say nothing that unpredictable happened during the filming. So that's not the. I knew the story that I wanted to tell with John, and I don't think anything particularly unpredictable happened during the filming. It's not like a sort of verite story. It was a past tense story that happened over the course of 30 years. So yeah, I'm afraid there was no big surprises as I was filming. Most unpredictable things that happened were as I was researching it and found out that John has amazing taste in music that I happen to share. In fact, he's spent a lot of time broadcasting sort of 70s German electronic music that I happen to also be really into. So that was one of the deciding factors that made me want to make the film. I found some old archive footage of John pulling out a really rare old album by a band called Harmonia. And when I saw that footage, I was very surprised. And that was one of the things that made me want to make the film. So I guess the most unpredictable thing happened in the researching of his story.
Okay. Did anybody else have unpredictable moments?
Well, there's always unpredictable moments, right? For me, you have the sweet, loving Italian grandmother, and she's talking about Sophia Loren films. Little did I know she would pick 4 of the most seminal Italian neorealist films to show us and to really sort of talk about her life through. That was a lovely surprise, and I had no idea. We just let her choose her. She just offered to show us those. And then when Vincenza, again, she's this wonderful, joyful woman, and I never thought, and again, this is about time spent. You know, we all know this. It's the time you spend with people, and, you know, taking 2.5 years for a short film might seem a little bit crazy, but that intimacy that grows, and that bond and that trust, I mean, it's I don't know what, you know, I use the word honor, I use the word, it's just beautiful when you cross that threshold. And when Vincenza started talking to us about her son who almost died from cancer, and another son who suffered abuse, and her third son who tragically passed away, all of a sudden my desire, one of the big challenges before, was how do I take this story and find the depth in it? You know, it seems like a sweet little phrase, but because we spent that time and that time really getting to know Vincenza and having that trust, she just shared things with us that, I mean, they're beautiful. And yeah, that was a surprise. And, you know, I knew there was depth there, but I didn't know how we would get it. Yeah.
We've got one more question. Let's see. In one word, what is the biggest asset you have as an artist to overcome the maze of obstacles in order to get your short film to the finish line? I'm going to give you all permission to use more than one word for this.
I'll start.
Yeah.
Can you wait? Put the question up there again. The biggest asset to overcome the obstacle. Fear. Fear is the asset. Fear of not knowing if you're going to do it, not knowing. Fear sort of pushes me to, just get this done. Because I want. I don't know. There's on so many levels, and hopefully, when people stand up and clap, that's also a wonderful thing. But it's the fear of wanting to do justice to the story and wanting to make great art.
Yeah, I would follow up and say, for me, I work as an editor, so I make my living, and I make films. I sort of direct films. I make them myself, and they're sort of made for me, and I'm very happy to share them with people. But they make them for me, and I would say the thing that I need is that sort of a desire within oneself to tell that story. I think it's kind of useless if you just feel like making a film and you choose a subject and that's the film you make. It has to be something, a story that resonates with you, and that you want to do anything to get that story out there and to get it made, because it is hard making films, and there has to be a sort of driving force within oneself to do it. And so I would say it's the desire to see the story out there, manifest in the world.
Mm-hmm. Right. Sophia, what's the one thing that got you through it?
Both of these resonate so deeply. I think what kept me so focused is that I became really intimate in conversations with Latasha herself, with her spirit, and feeling like this was a calling for me. This was not something that I just stumbled upon. So really wanting to make the family proud, really wanting to honor Latasha. There was a lot of tenacity that I needed because, as we heard, the fear a lot of times would overpower me. And there were times where I was not sure how I was going to finish, but I knew I had to finish. And also wanting to create something that surpasses time and space, where it's not just, you're not just making a story for this moment, but you understand how important this piece of art is in the full picture, 20 years from now, 10 years from now. It wasn't just about, I have to quickly make a movie to exist in this moment. It needed to be something that would forever live, that would forever be remembered as this blueprint of a new way to experience storytelling. But really just the tenacity of knowing this had to be done for Latasha.
Right.
That being a creative and an artist is like a gift and a curse. So when you start caring about something, you're kind of like stuck with it until you're done, and it drives you crazy. So in order to go to sleep, you have to finish it, basically. So that kind of like keeps going. But being involved with a documentary was a little bit different because, in fiction, you're driving yourself crazy with your idea and your vision. While if you're telling the story of a family, it's their energy that you're really going for. So, it's day by day, just really pulling from their energy and telling their story. And like the finishing line for me comes in, many shapes and forms. But one of them was when we had a screening, and one of the grandmothers who in the film, Brandon shares that when they came out, one of their grandmothers said, "I'll give you $10,000 to remain a girl." So, and we had the screening, and it really brought the family together. That was like the biggest surprise, like seeing like, wait, hey, I'm actually a part of uniting a family. And the grandmother came to me and she said, it was like almost like a confession, very emotional. And she told me that she regrets saying that, but the reason why she was saying it was not embarrassment or, oh, I don't want a gay or trans grandkid. It was more, she was worried for the safety of Brendan, because the highest and suicide rate, but murder rates are also in the trans community. So to me, that's kind of like a finishing line. It's like a full circle, how even within our families we have arguments but somehow it all kind of like gets to a point and closes.
Yeah. Well, there are 4 really beautiful films, and thank you all for joining us. Everybody who's watching, thank you for joining us. It was great to have you. Be sure to take advantage of our free trial to Wrap Pro so you can learn about more upcoming screenings and events. You can also register for screenings and catch up on past screenings by visiting TheWrap.com and going to the screenings tab in the main navigation bar. So filmmakers, thank you very much for your films and for the conversation.